Every Saturday at 9 a.m., I bought 2 bunches of white tulips at the flower counter of Value Market. I'd been doing it for 3 years, ever since Margaret died. The woman behind the counter, Donna, always had them wrapped and waiting by the time I reached the register. That Saturday in April, she rang them up like always. $9.40. I tapped my card. The little screen blinked red. Declined. Donna looked at it, then at me, then tried again. Still declined. I frowned. That can't be right. I have money in that account. She smiled the way people smile when they don't know what else to do. Sometimes the machine glitches, Mr. Whitfield. Want to try a different card? I pulled out my backup card, the one I kept for emergencies. Declined again. A man behind me in line shifted his weight and checked his watch. A teenager on her phone didn't even look up, but I felt her notice anyway. I felt everyone notice. That particular kind of quiet that settles over a line when an old man's card doesn't work. Nobody says anything cruel. Nobody has to. I could feel it in my collar, in my neck, in the way my hands suddenly didn't know where to go. It's fine, I told Donna. I'll come back later. I left the tulips on the counter and walked out into the parking lot without them, which was the first Saturday in 3 years Margaret's grave went without flowers. I sat in my truck for a minute before I called my daughter. Claire picked up on the third ring, her voice bright and a little too quick, the way it got when she already knew what the call was about. Hi, Dad. My cards aren't working, I said. Both of them. There was a pause just half a second too long. Yeah, she said. About that. We froze them. I actually laughed, a short, disbelieving laugh. You what? We froze your accounts, Dad. Todd and I talked about it, and we thought, with everything going on, it made sense to simplify things for a while. Nothing's going on, Claire. I'm fine. There was rustling on her end, and then Todd's voice came through, calm, reasonable, the voice he used when he was explaining something to the kids. Arthur, hey, look, we should have called you first, that's on us. But you're 72, and a few things have slipped lately, and we just want to make sure nobody takes advantage of you. Nobody's taking advantage of me, I said. I haven't forgotten a single thing in my life that mattered. Todd's voice stayed even. That's not really what I meant. I know what you meant, I said. I sat there gripping the wheel of my truck in a grocery store parking lot, 72 years old, being told by my son-in-law that my own money now required his permission. If you need anything, Claire said, just call us. We'll take care of it. Take care of it. Not ask me. Take care of it. Like I was an account line item. I said the only thing I could manage. I understand. Thank you. Then I hung up before either of them could hear what was underneath my voice. I didn't drive home. I drove to Cedar Falls Savings, the same bank I'd used since Margaret and I moved to this town 41 years ago. I'd built Whitfield Drug from a single rented storefront into the only pharmacy on Main Street for 38 years before I sold the practice and retired. I still owned the building. A bookshop rented the ground floor now, and I collected a modest check from them every month, which along with my pension and Margaret's old teacher's retirement, kept me comfortable enough. We'd raised Claire in the yellow house on Birch Street. We buried Margaret 3 years ago this past January, a stroke that took her in 9 days after 46 years of marriage. Grief doesn't leave. It just learns to sit quietly in the corner of a room. Some mornings I still made 2 cups of coffee before I remembered. Patricia Nguyen had managed that branch for 18 years, and she'd known me the whole time. She looked up from her desk and smiled the moment I walked in. Mr. Whitfield. Good morning, I said, though I wasn't sure it was. Something in my face must have shown, because her smile faded fast. Everything okay? I don't think it is, I said. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from her while she pulled up my account. I watched her expression change the way a person's expression changes when they're reading something they don't want to have to explain. Mr. Whitfield, she said slowly. I'm seeing some changes here I want to ask you about. What kind of changes? Your mailing address was updated 2 weeks ago. I leaned in. It wasn't my address on the yellow house on Birch Street. It was Claire's. My stomach tightened. She kept scrolling. Your phone number on file was also changed to Todd's cell, and the email address associated with the account. That's Claire's email, I said, before she even told me. Patricia nodded slowly. I never asked for any of that, I told her. I know, she said quietly. That's why I want to bring someone else into this conversation. She picked up her desk phone. Could you send Marcus down from fraud prevention? Marcus Webb came down 10 minutes later carrying a laptop and a folder. He was young, careful, the kind of person who asked questions in a certain order for a reason. Mr. Whitfield, has anyone had access to your online banking credentials? My son-in-law helped me set it up a while back, I said. He works in cybersecurity. He thought I should modernize. Marcus and Patricia exchanged a look, quick, professional, the kind of look I imagine passes between people who've watched this particular movie before and already know how it ends. Marcus turned his laptop toward me. There's an authorization form on file, dated 6 weeks ago, granting a secondary party administrative access to move funds and request replacement cards. I stared at the signature at the bottom. It was my name, written the way I'd written it my whole life. The same loop on the W, the same short dash under it. Only I hadn't signed it. Not this, not ever. Can a signature be copied? I asked. That's one possibility, Marcus said carefully. Patricia folded her hands. Mr. Whitfield, before we assume anything, I'd like to pull every change made to this account over the last several months. Every single one. Sometimes, she said, this doesn't happen all at once. Marcus added quietly, it happens a little at a time, until one day it's already finished. I sat there thinking about $9.40 worth of tulips still sitting on a counter at Value Market, and I understood, for the first time, that this had never actually been about the flowers. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my recliner with the television off, looking at a photograph of Margaret from our 30th anniversary, the two of us on the porch of the yellow house, her laughing at something I'd said that I could no longer remember. Margaret used to tell me, when something doesn't add up, don't rush to fix it, first understand it. She'd run our household books for 40 years and never once been wrong about a number. I decided that night I wasn't going to call Claire. Not yet. 38 years behind a pharmacy counter taught me that you never hand someone medication before you understand exactly what's wrong with them. The next morning, I went back to the bank, and Marcus met me with a thicker folder than the day before. He laid it out chronologically. 7 months ago, your online credentials were reset. That tracked. Todd had helped me set up the new phone around then. The following month, a secondary contact was added. Todd. Then Claire 3 weeks after that. Then transaction alerts were rerouted, Marcus said. Rerouted where? To your son-in-law's phone. I stopped receiving fraud notifications on my own account, I said slowly. According to these records, yes. Then, for months ago, your daily spending limit was lowered. To what? I asked. He hesitated. For $100. I almost laughed at that one, the way you laugh at something too absurd to be insulting. I'd filled 30 years of prescriptions, run a business, balanced payroll for 6 employees, and now someone had quietly decided I needed a permission slip to spend more than $400 of my own money. Patricia said gently, we found no evidence that any money was actually taken, Mr. Whitfield. So what is this? I asked. She chose her words with care. It looks like increasing control. Control. Not theft. Control. Driving home. Things I hadn't thought twice about started rearranging themselves in my memory. At Christmas, Claire had quietly paid the whole restaurant bill before I could reach for my wallet. You've done enough for one lifetime, Dad, she'd said, smiling. At the time I thought it was generosity. Now I remembered her asking, almost offhand, whether I still carried all those old cards, whether it wasn't confusing keeping track of so many. And Todd, over the holidays, had offered to help me organize my tax files, then asked oddly specific questions. How much did I keep liquid? Were there any CDs maturing? Had I updated my beneficiaries lately? At the time I thought he was being thorough. Now I wondered if he'd been taking inventory. That afternoon, I drove to Warren Cole's office. Warren had drafted Margaret's and my wills 18 years earlier. He still worked out of the same cramped office above the hardware store, still drove the same rusted-out Buick, and he was still, in my experience, the most careful reader of fine print I had ever met. He looked genuinely glad to see me until he saw my face. Arthur. He stood and shook my hand. This isn't a social call, is it? No, I said. It isn't. I spent nearly an hour telling him everything, and Warren didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he asked to see every document the bank had sent me. He put on his reading glasses and went quiet for a long time. Finally, he took them off. Something here isn't right. You saw it too, I said. He nodded. This authorization form references a meeting that supposedly took place in this office. It never happened. I know, I said. He looked at me steadily. Because I wasn't in the room for it. Neither was I. What do? I asked him. He closed the folder. Nothing. Nothing. Don't confront them. Why not? Because if they believe they've succeeded, Warren said, they'll stop being careful. People get sloppy when they think they've already won. Before I left, he asked me something that seemed to come out of nowhere. Has anyone brought up assisted living lately? I went still. Why would you ask that? Answer the question. I thought back. A few times, I admitted. Who? Claire mostly. Framed how? Always gently. Always as a kindness. Wouldn't it be nice not to worry about the yard anymore, Dad? You'd have people your own age to talk to. I'd always smiled and changed the subject. Warren nodded slowly, like a man confirming something he'd already suspected. I've seen this pattern before, he said. Financial control tends to come before something bigger. Bigger like what? Like a legal declaration that someone can't manage their own affairs anymore. I'm not saying that's what's happening, he added quickly, but it's possible. I drove home past the new assisted living community on Route 9, the one with the covered porches and the walking paths, and I remembered Claire handing me a glossy brochure for the exact same place 6 weeks earlier. Just thought you might like to see it, she'd said. No pressure. I hadn't even opened it. Now I wondered how long the pressure had actually been there, quiet and invisible, underneath every kind thing she'd said to me. Warren called 2 days later. I've been digging, he said. Property records. My chest tightened. What about them? Not your house, he said. The pharmacy building. What about it? I found an email thread. Not yours, he said. Todd's. He reached out to a commercial appraiser 6 weeks ago, asking what buildings like yours on Main Street were currently worth. My hands went cold around the phone. He can't sell that building, I said. Not without your signature. No, Warren said. But someone planning ahead might still want to know its value. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Margaret and I had done our books every month for 4 decades, where I'd taught Claire long division, where we'd planned 2 vacations we could barely afford and one we couldn't afford at all. This wasn't about tulips anymore. It wasn't even about the building. It was about the fact that someone I had spent my whole life protecting had quietly decided I no longer got a vote in my own life. Warren called again that evening, his voice more serious than I'd ever heard it. I need you to come in Monday morning, he said. Did you find something else? I believe, he said carefully, that they may already be preparing paperwork to question your competency. I sat in my kitchen a long time after that call, looking out the window at the garden Margaret used to keep, and I understood for the first time that this wasn't a family disagreement anymore. It was a race, and if I moved carelessly, I stood to lose more than a credit card limit. Warren met me Monday with 2 folders and a cup of coffee gone cold on his desk. I spent the weekend thinking, he said. So did I? For now, he said, let them keep believing exactly what they believe. Meaning I pretend I don't know? I said. That feels dishonest. It's strategic, he said. If they think you figured this out, they'll go quiet. They'll stop talking to each other where anyone can hear. They'll start covering tracks. But if they think you're still in the dark, they'll keep behaving the way they've been behaving. And people reveal far more through ordinary behavior than they ever do under questioning. I'd never been much good at hiding things. Margaret used to say she could always tell when I was planning a surprise because my face gave it away within an hour. Now I had to carry the biggest discovery of my life behind an ordinary face, not for revenge, but because I wanted the truth laid out plainly before I acted on anything. That afternoon Claire called, her voice cheerful and relieved. Hey, Dad. You doing okay? I'm managing, I said. Want to come for dinner Thursday? Sounds good, I said. She hesitated. And don't worry about the cards. We've got it handled. I appreciate you looking out for me, I said, and meant every word of it in a way she couldn't have understood. She laughed softly. I knew you'd come around. Thursday, Claire and Todd showed up with a casserole and the kids in tow. Claire hugged me at the door. You look tired, Dad. Didn't sleep great, I admitted. She glanced at Todd. Did you take your blood pressure pill this morning? I've taken that pill every morning for 11 years, Claire. I know, she said. Just checking. We talked about the grandkids' soccer season and the price of gas until dessert, when Todd cleared his throat. Dad, we've been thinking. About what? Managing money gets stressful as people get older, he said. We don't want you worrying about bills or scams. Claire reached over and took my hand. You've spent your whole life taking care of this family. Let us take care of you for once. I looked at both of them and nodded slowly. Maybe you're right, I said. Relief spread across both their faces so fast and so plainly that it told me more than any argument could have. Over the next 2 weeks, I became exactly who they expected. I called Todd before any purchase over $100, not because I needed to, but to watch how he'd respond. I mentioned needing a new water heater. $600, roughly. Silence. Then, why don't we wait on that and talk it through first? Talk it through, as if I were 16 asking to borrow the car. I mentioned a weekend fishing trip with my old business partner. Claire asked if that was really safe at my age. I've fished that lake for 40 years, I told her. I know, she said, smiling, but accidents happen. Each conversation sounded reasonable enough on its own. Together, they pointed the same direction. Smaller life. Fewer choices. Less say. Warren told me to write everything down, so I bought a spiral notebook and filled it with dates, times, exact words. Every decision made for me without asking went in that notebook. Marcus called every few days with new findings. Anything illegal? I asked him once. He was careful with his answer. Intent matters, he said. Helping an aging parent isn't a crime. Neither is setting up online banking. The question is whether it crossed into control without consent. It's the pattern that concerns us, he said. Not any one thing. The pattern. One Saturday, I stopped into the hardware store for a bag of grass seed. The owner, a woman named Rosa who'd run the place for 20 years, asked, almost in passing, when I was planning to list the pharmacy building. I stopped walking. What makes you think I'm listing it? Todd mentioned it a few weeks back, she said. Said you two were thinking about selling before winter. I forced a smile and told her nothing had been decided. She looked confused. I figured it was already in motion, she said. I drove home with my jaw tight. Todd wasn't only planning. He was talking about that plan in the past tense to other people before he'd ever mentioned a word of it to me. A few days after that, my neighbor Ray Doyle caught me at the mailbox. Ray had spent 30 years as a detective before retiring, and he and his wife had lived next door since before Claire was born. Got a minute, Arthur? Sure. We sat on my porch, and he didn't waste time. Rosa mentioned something to my wife. Everything all right over here? I could have said fine, the way I'd said fine to everyone else for weeks. Instead, I told him the truth. He listened without interrupting once, and when I finished, he said, I've seen this exact shape before, more times than I'd like to count. You think Todd's stealing from me? I asked. Maybe, maybe not, he said. Sometimes it isn't about money at all. It's about people convincing themselves that taking someone's choices away is the same thing as loving them. He reached into his jacket and handed me a business card. Grace Alvarez, it read. Elder Law. Warren's already handling this, I told him. Warren's good, Ray said, but Grace does one thing and does it better than anyone I ever worked a case with. What's that? I asked. She protects competent people from being treated like they aren't. That evening, Warren called sounding almost excited, which for Warren was unusual. We caught a break, he said. What happened? A document Todd sent his financial planner got copied to the wrong email by mistake. It landed in a general inbox at the firm, and someone forwarded it to me by accident too. My heart was pounding before he even told me the rest. What did it say? I asked. He read me the subject line. Before Dad finds out. Those 4 words sat in my chest the rest of the night. Before Dad finds out. as if my whole future were already a document in progress, and I was simply the last person scheduled to be informed of it. By early summer, my life had split cleanly into two halves. In one, I was Arthur Whitfield, retired pharmacist, tending Margaret's roses, taking my grandkids fishing, showing up to church on Sundays like I always had. In the other, I was quietly assembling a record against my own daughter and her husband. Some nights I couldn't believe both halves belonged to the same man. Warren reminded me often that I wasn't building a case against Claire. I was building a record of the truth. There's a difference. One wants punishment. The other wants clarity. That distinction was the only thing that kept the bitterness from setting in permanently. Warren introduced me to Grace Alvarez the following week. Ray had been right about her. She didn't raise her voice once in the hour we spent together. She listened more than she spoke, and near the end she asked only one question. Has any doctor ever diagnosed you with cognitive impairment of any kind, Mr. Whitfield? Never. When was your last physical? 2 months ago. Any concerns noted? My doctor told me to eat fewer of Rose's cinnamon rolls and walk more. Grace almost smiled. That's a good sign. She made a few notes. Based on everything I'm hearing, you are entirely capable of managing your own affairs. I know that, I said. I know you know it, she said. The problem isn't convincing yourself. It's being able to prove it if someone else tries to argue otherwise. Those words landed heavier than I expected, because by then that possibility no longer felt distant. It felt close. Over the following 2 weeks, Grace and Warren worked with the bank to build a full timeline. Every credential reset, every address change, every rerouted alert, every lowered limit, every replacement card. Nothing exaggerated, nothing assumed. If it couldn't be proven with a document, it didn't go in. We deal in facts, Grace told me. Facts don't need to be loud. One afternoon, she slid a binder across her desk. Inside was everything. My notebook, printed emails, bank statements, phone logs, written statements from Patricia and Marcus. I turned through it slowly. It wasn't one big betrayal. It was dozens of small ones, stacked quietly on top of each other, like bricks pulled one at a time from the bottom of a wall, until eventually the whole thing gave way. Meanwhile, Claire and Todd played the part of devoted family beautifully. At church, they made sure everyone saw them walking me to my pew. We just want to keep an eye on him, Claire would say to anyone within earshot, and people would tell her how lucky I was to have children who cared so much. I'd smile and agree. It wasn't even a lie. They had been involved. The question was in what? My grandkids stayed blissfully unaware through most of it. Sophie had just turned 10. Max was 7. They still chased each other through my backyard and begged me to make grilled cheese whenever they visited. Kids notice more than we give them credit for, though. One afternoon, Sophie looked up from her drawing. Grandpa, why does Mom always ask Dad if you remembered your pills? I asked her what she meant. She said you forget things now, Sophie said, frowning slightly. I don't think you forget things. Neither did I, sweetheart, I told her, and smiled. Sometimes grown-ups worry more than they need to. She nodded and went back to her drawing, and I sat there for a long while after, thinking that whatever happened next, those 2 kids were not going to become collateral damage in it. Late one afternoon, Todd stopped by with a folder under his arm. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table Claire had once done her homework at while Margaret baked, and slid a stack of glossy brochures toward me. I've been looking into some senior communities, he said. Beautiful photos. Walking trails. A dining hall. You'd really like it here, Dad. I like it here, I said, gesturing around my own kitchen. I know, he said gently. But this house is a lot to keep up alone. It isn't, I told him. You wouldn't have to mow anymore. I like mowing. You wouldn't have to shovel in the winter. I've shoveled this driveway for 41 winters, Todd. He smiled the patient smile of a man who believed he already knew how this conversation would end. I just want you somewhere safer, he said. Another reasonable word. Another brick quietly pulled out. And what happens to this house? I asked. We'd figure that out, he said. We. Not me. I told him I'd think about it. His shoulders relaxed like the matter was already settled. After he left, I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words under the date. He assumes agreement. A week later, Warren called and said it was time. Time for what? I asked. To protect yourself properly. That afternoon, Grace, Warren, and I sat down for 3 hours and rebuilt my entire estate plan from scratch. My will, my retirement accounts, the pharmacy building, the house on Birch Street, all of it. I don't want to punish Claire, I told them. I know, Grace said. Nothing here is designed to punish anyone. We built a plan around an independent professional trustee who would only ever step in if 2 separate licensed physicians confirmed I genuinely couldn't manage my own affairs anymore. Not a family member, not a guess, not a convenient assumption. The pharmacy building and the house both went into a trust that couldn't be sold without my signature while I was competent, full stop. The safeguards weren't there to shut Claire and Todd out. They were there to make sure no single person could ever quietly take the wheel again. This protects what you've built, Grace said as I signed. It also protects my family, I told her. Sometimes, she said, those are the same thing. Then came the part that surprised even me. I want everyone in one room, I told Warren. Claire and Todd, obviously, I said. And you, Grace, Patricia, and Marcus. Warren raised an eyebrow. That's a strange guest list for dinner. It won't really be a dinner, I said. He understood immediately. I called Claire and invited her and Todd for Sunday dinner. Just family, nothing unusual. She sounded pleased. That'll be nice, she said. I've invited a couple other people too, I told her. Warren, for one. A pause. Anything wrong, Dad? No, I said. Just an important conversation I want everyone present for. I looked out my kitchen window at the maple Margaret had planted the spring Claire was born, its branches thick with early summer leaves, and thought, not for the last time, that some conversations simply couldn't be had one-on-one anymore. When Sunday came, Claire and Todd arrived with a bakery pie and their easy, practiced warmth. Claire hugged me at the door. You look good, Dad. I feel good, I told her, and meant it more than she realized. She noticed the table was already set for more than 4. What's going on? Let's sit down first, I said. Warren arrived, then Grace, then Patricia and Marcus a few minutes later, Marcus carrying a slim folder under his arm. Claire's smile tightened by the time everyone was seated. What's all this? Todd asked, though something in his voice had already gone careful. Please, I said, sit. When everyone was settled, Todd looked at me with the same confident, relieved expression he'd worn for weeks now. Dad, he said, does this mean you've finally decided to let us handle things? I looked at him for a long moment. Yes, I said. The word landed and sat there. Todd exhaled, visibly relieved. Claire reached over and squeezed his hand under the table, thinking I hadn't noticed. I noticed everything by then. I'd had weeks of practice. Before we eat, I said, I want to thank you both for everything you've done these past several months. Claire smiled, a little uncertain now. You don't have to thank us, Dad. I do, I said. You've taught me something important. Todd looked pleased, waiting. What's that? He asked. You've taught me exactly how good intentions can turn into control, I said, without either of you ever noticing the line you crossed. The room went still. Todd's smile faltered. I don't think I follow, he said. I think you do, I told him. I reached beside my chair and set the binder in the middle of the table. No one's in trouble yet, I said. This is simply the story of the last 7 months. Claire's arms crossed instinctively. The first change happened 7 months ago, I said, sliding the first document forward. My online credentials were reset. Todd's jaw tightened. I helped you with that, he said. I know, I said. The second change rerouted my fraud alerts to your phone, so I could catch anything suspicious, he said quickly. I nodded slowly. I believed that too once. Another page. The third change lowered my spending limit to $400 without ever telling me. Claire spoke up fast. That was to protect you from fraud, Dad. Patricia spoke, calm and professional. Our records show Mr. Whitfield was never informed of that change. Claire turned toward her. We were trying to help. Marcus opened his folder. Helping usually involves telling the account holder, he said quietly. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. The documents did that work on their own. I kept turning pages. Address changes. Replacement cards. The rerouted email. Each one dated. Each one telling its own small piece of the story. Todd wasn't angry watching it unfold. He looked unsettled, like a man realizing the picture in front of him no longer matched the one he'd been carrying in his head. You both signed authorization forms, Claire said. I looked at her directly. No, I said. Someone did. Marcus set another folder on the table. We've already reviewed the signatures in question. Claire's arms crossed tighter. Several are inconsistent with Mr. Whitfield's verified signature on file, Marcus said. Todd turned sharply toward her. What does that mean exactly? We're determining how those forms were obtained, Marcus said carefully. Todd turned to Claire. What is he talking about, Claire? For the first time all evening, she didn't answer right away. Warren spoke next. Todd, he said, I'd like to ask you something directly. Todd nodded slowly. Did Arthur ever ask you to change his mailing address? No. Did he ask you to lower his spending limit? No. Did he ask you to reroute his fraud alerts? No. Todd looked at Claire. I thought. He started, then stopped. Warren waited. You thought what? I thought you'd talk to your father about all of this, Todd said. Every eye at the table turned to Claire. She looked genuinely caught off guard. You assumed I'd handled it, she said. You told me you had, Todd said. I told you I mentioned it, Claire said. Mentioning something isn't the same as asking, Grace said quietly. The table went silent. I felt something break loose in my chest, not from betrayal exactly, but from realizing that my own daughter hadn't been leading any of this on purpose. She had simply stopped asking questions somewhere along the way. Somehow that was worse. Grace turned to Claire gently. May I ask you something, Mrs. Doyle? Sorry, Mrs. Reeves? Claire nodded. When did you first start believing your father couldn't manage on his own? Claire looked down at the table for a long moment. I don't know exactly, she said. Think about it, Grace said. After Mom died, Claire finally said. He seemed so lost. He was, I said quietly. He missed a dentist appointment once, Claire went on. He asked Todd how to use the new phone. Small things. I paid the dentist late fee within a week, I said. I know, Claire said. And what did those small things become? Grace asked her. Claire's eyes filled. Evidence, she whispered. Were they actually evidence? Grace asked. No, Claire said. They were assumptions. I got up and walked to the window for a moment. Margaret's rose bushes were still blooming out past the porch, the ones she'd babied every summer of our marriage. I came back carrying an old photo album and opened it to a picture of Claire at 9, standing proudly beside a birdhouse we'd built together one weekend in the garage. You remember this? I asked her. She smiled despite herself. We stayed out there until it was too dark to see, she said. You never quit on that birdhouse, I said. Neither did you, she said. I closed the album. When did you decide I deserved less patience than that? I asked her. Her eyes filled instantly. Dad? No, she started. I want to know, I said gently. Neither she nor Todd answered right away. Finally, Todd stood, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm sorry, he said. No excuses. Just that. I honestly believed I was protecting him, he said, to no one in particular. I know you did, I said. I never wanted your money, he said. I believe you, I told him. I thought if I just handled everything. His voice cracked. Nothing bad could happen to him. Instead, I said quietly, you made something bad happen. Claire was crying freely now. Todd, she said. He shook his head slowly. No more, he said. He looked back at me. I should have talked to you. Yes, I said. I should have trusted you. Yes. I stopped seeing you as my father-in-law, he admitted. I started seeing you as something to manage. The honesty of that sentence sat heavy over the whole table. Claire finally spoke, so quietly I almost missed it. I thought efficiency was the same thing as kindness, she said. Nobody answered, because there was nothing left to argue about. Warren broke the silence. Arthur, there's one more matter, he said. I nodded. I know. I looked at Claire and Todd. I've already signed a new estate plan, I told them. Claire's face fell. I understand, she said quietly. You haven't heard it yet, I told her. This isn't punishment. I rested my hand on the binder. It protects everyone at this table, including both of you. She looked confused. I'll explain, I said. But first, I looked around the table. I think we should eat. Dinner that night was almost strangely ordinary. Someone asked for more mashed potatoes. Patricia complimented my green beans, and Marcus went back for seconds before dessert. For a few minutes, nobody mentioned banks or binders or signatures at all. We simply ate, and it reminded me of something Margaret used to say whenever Claire and I argued over something small. Nobody solves a family problem on an empty stomach, she'd say, and more often than not, she was right. When the plates were cleared, I poured coffee for everyone. Nobody's card had to work for this cup, I said, mostly to myself. Warren opened the new binder. Arthur has asked me to walk everyone through the changes, he said. Claire nodded, listening now instead of defending. The previous power of attorney has been revoked, Warren said. Neither of them reacted. Arthur retains full control over every financial decision, he continued, exactly as it should have been the whole time. If Arthur is ever genuinely unable to manage his affairs, that determination requires two independent physicians, not a family vote. Todd asked who would step in if that ever happened. An independent licensed fiduciary, Grace said. Not a family member, no matter how well-intentioned. Claire finally spoke again. You don't trust us, she said. I answered before anyone else could. No, I said. The word sat there plainly. I don't trust any one person with that much unchecked power, I said. Not you. Not Todd. Not even myself, if I'm honest. That's why we built safeguards instead of relying on assumptions, Warren said. Exactly, I said. I explained the part that mattered most to me. The pharmacy building and the house have both gone into a trust, I said. Can they still be sold someday? Claire asked. Of course, I said. When I decide to, or after I'm gone. A small silence followed. That building isn't valuable to me because of the market, I told them. It's valuable because your mother used to walk down there every day at noon just to bring me lunch. I pointed toward the hallway. And this house has your height marked on that door frame every birthday since you were 2. A stranger sees property, I said. I see my whole life. Claire lowered her head. I forgot that somewhere along the way, she admitted. I know, I said. There was one more thing. I pulled a thin folder from beside my chair. This has nothing to do with inheritance, I told them. What is it? Todd asked. I've started a small fund, I said, for financial literacy classes at the senior center. Free workshops, twice a month, on scams, online banking, powers of attorney, that sort of thing. Claire looked genuinely surprised. Why? She asked. Because I watched how easily this happened to me. A man who ran a business for 38 years, I said. If it can happen to me quietly, it can happen to anyone. Patricia offered the bank's help right there at the table. Marcus said the fraud team would gladly send a speaker. Warren offered to teach the legal side himself. I couldn't help but smile. Margaret would have loved this, I thought. Turning something painful into something useful had always been more her instinct than mine. The weeks that followed weren't simple. Trust doesn't come back just because someone apologizes. It comes back because their behavior changes and keeps changing. Todd started calling before he visited instead of just showing up. One Saturday, he noticed my porch step was loose and asked, instead of assumed, whether he could fix it. I told him I'd appreciate that. One sentence. One question. It felt entirely different from everything before it. Claire took longer. She wrote me an actual letter, not a text, not an email. She admitted she'd grown up watching her own grandmother slide into dementia while the family scrambled too late to protect her, and somewhere along the way she decided that acting early, even without asking, was simply what love looked like. She'd confused preparation with permission, she wrote. Protection with control. She didn't ask me to pretend none of it had happened. That mattered more than an apology alone ever could have. Summer eased into fall. Sophie started middle school. Max lost his first tooth playing catch in my backyard. Almost exactly 1 year after that first Saturday, I drove to Value Market before 9 in the morning, the way I always had. Donna was at the flower counter, same as ever. 2 bunches of white tulips, she said, already reaching for them. She rang me up. $9.60, inflation being what it is. I tapped my card. Approved. No hesitation. No red screen. Just one quiet beep and a receipt sliding out of the machine. She handed me the flowers. "Have a good one, Mr. Whitfield." As I turned toward the door, someone called out behind me. "Dad." Todd had followed me there, having started joining me on these Saturday trips a few months back, something I never asked him to do and never told him to stop. "Let me get the next round," he said, reaching for his wallet. I looked at him, then at the card already back in my pocket. "No," I told him. "I've got this." He hesitated, then smiled. Not the confident smile of a man taking charge, but the smile of someone who'd finally learned the difference between helping and taking over. "I know you do," he said. We walked out together into the parking lot, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't a man being managed, and he wasn't a man trying to manage me. Just a father-in-law and a son-in-law, learning a little later than either of us would have liked that love without respect eventually curdles into control, but love paired with respect can still grow back into something like family. Driving to the cemetery with the tulips on the seat beside me, I thought about how none of this had ever really been about $9.40. It had been about months of quiet assumptions dressed up as kindness, about how easily control can wear the same clothes as love if nobody stops to check. Growing older doesn't mean giving up your voice. Needing a little help doesn't mean surrendering every choice you have left. And if you truly love someone who's getting older, you don't quietly take the wheel from them. You sit beside them, you ask what they actually want, and then you listen to the answer, even when it isn't the one that's easiest for you. If this story reminded you of your own father, your grandmother, or maybe even a version of yourself you're afraid of becoming one day, I hope you'll hold on to that. And if it moved you at all, share it with someone who might need the reminder that respect is one of the last true gifts we get to give the people we love. I'd genuinely like to know, if you were sitting at that table in Arthur's place, would you have handled it the same way, or would you have done something differently?